So again, welcome. I'm Jean Hill, Executive Vice President of Maccabee Public Relations. And on behalf of all of us, really appreciate you attending. I hope you have coffee in hand. And this is going to be a great presentation. We're really looking forward to it. I'm really fortunate that I've had a chance to have a sneak peek at the presentation. And I've also had a chance to read Corona Marketing and Beyond, What Marketing Professionals Must Do Now to Survive the Crisis, which was written by our presenter, Joe Pulizzi. He's a best-selling author, entrepreneur, and content marketing guru. We'll send a link to that book after this session today. But please know, in it, he writes that COVID-19 pandemic has really changed the world as we know it. Yet even in the pandemic, Joe says that marketers and PR pros have been given a chance to create something amazing. I think that's very uplifting. So in this Sharper Angle event, we're excited that Joe will start our event by sharing with you insights about how the greatest businesses of the next decade are being built right now, even during the pandemic, and why now is time to double down on content marketing. We'll also have discussions about internal communications, influencer marketing, killing social channels, diversification, and more. And then we'll open it up for questions. And I know you'll have some. I do already. So let me introduce Joe to you. Joe.
Jean, oh, I'm sorry. I thought you already introduced me. That was great.
I've got a lot of credentials that I want to let everyone know about. Joe Pulizzi is an Amazon best-selling author of Killing Marketing, Content Inc. and Epic Content Marketing, which was named a must-read business book by Fortune magazine. He has successfully launched 3 companies, including Content Marketing Institute, along with a podcast series called This Old Marketing with CMI's Robert Rose, which has resulted in millions of downloads from over 150 countries. Joe also sends out a bi-weekly newsletter called The Random Newsletter, which reaches thousands. Really, thank you so much for being here today, Joe, and sharing your knowledge with us. Let's talk Corona Marketing and Beyond. Joe?
All right. Perfect. Thank you, Jean. Oh, thank you to everyone that got up this morning and talk a little bit about marketing and PR. So I'm just going to we're going to get a conversation starter going, talk a little bit about some of the stuff I covered in Corona Marketing, my latest book, and then we're going to get into some fine Q&A. So if you have any questions, please, let us know and we'll be happy to get to it. So I'm just going to cover 4 things really quickly to set the stage for what I see going on in content creation in mid-sized companies and enterprises, and how I think that we have an opportunity right now to really reset. And of course, you've probably seen that a lot of companies, we're sort of starting from scratch. We're looking at our goals in a fresh way and figuring out this movement, which in a lot of ways is fantastic. This movement to really focus on the needs and pain points of our audience, how we can solve those through our communications. And if we do that, they know, like, and trust us more and will ultimately buy more from us. And I think it's the best kind of marketing that's out there. So there's a couple things I want to talk about. And in the book, I talk about this thing called the content tilt. If you don't know what that is, we'll get to it. But what generally happens is when you look at building some kind of a content initiative, a content platform, let's say it's a blog, it's a podcast, it's a webinar series, whatever, you start with a mission statement. You start with, what's your sweet spot? What's your knowledge or skill area matched with what that audience desire is? That's how every media company starts. So you figure out your mission and it's like, okay, well, where does my audience find what's the content I'm going to deliver and what's the benefit? What's the outcome for the audience? And that's if you've ever worked in publishing, it's an editorial mission statement. We call it a content mission statement. The problem is we have to go further. And that's where we really get into this thing called the content tilt. Why? Because we are mired in sameness. And I'm sure your company gets into this, private company has this issue. And when you look at your competitive set, you look at the types of things you're trying to communicate with your customers about, there's a lot of the same stuff going on. And all I really did was, here's just a quick example. I just typed in cloud computing into Google and I tried to figure out what the leading companies were talking about. And if you go to Oracle or Amazon or IBM or Salesforce or Microsoft, all fantastic companies, right? They're pretty much talking about the same thing. Cloud computing talked about in the same way to the same types of people. And it's a little, I don't want to say it's depressing, but it is depressing. It is like, wow, you have a lot of budget here. You have a lot of opportunity. There's a lot of things you want to do. Why are we all talking about things the same way? And that's where I want you to think this morning about, well, can we talk about things in a little different way? And that's where we get to this content tilt. Content tilt, and it comes from actually the movie Matrix. When you have, if you remember the scene where Neo goes in and sees the little boy, and the little boy's bending the spoon, and the little Neo wants to bend the spoon, doesn't know how, and the boy says you have to look at things in a different way, and Neo ends up tilting his head. And that's what we have to do with any of our content creation. We have to look at what we're communicating to our customers and tilt our head just a little bit to see an area of little to no competition that you can actually break through all that clutter. I mean, because there's more content than ever before that's not going away. It's going to be more and more. So how can we cover it a little bit differently? So I talk about that in the book a little bit. You can do that through telling a different story. You could do it through a different platform. You could do it a lot of different ways, but and we'll probably talk some more about it, but I want to make sure that you aren't just covering, oh, here's what we are really good talking about, and here's the pain points of our audience. We have to figure out, how do we tell the story in a different way that nobody else is telling, so that we can build an audience and actually break through all the clutter that's going on. So that's the first thing I want you to just think about before we get to the questions. The second thing is, and this has been, I mean, you know, content marketing, I don't know how familiar you are with content marketing. Content marketing has been around for hundreds and hundreds of years, so this is nothing new. But now you've got a lot of companies taking it seriously. And what we're seeing is marketing departments are creating their own assets with their own revenues and profits behind the content and the audiences they're building. And that's what I think as marketing and PR professionals we have to prepare for, because you have an opportunity in your departments to actually generate direct revenue and profit, as well as solving the marketing and communication goals we have. Just give you a quick example. You know, it's funny. This morning, BuzzFeed came out. It was in the New York Times this morning. BuzzFeed is actually going to have a profit this year for the first time, I think, ever. So they've really, of course, some major cutbacks, but they've been able to figure something out. And I love BuzzFeed's model, because if you go back to 2014-15, when Facebook changed their algorithm, BuzzFeed didn't know if they could make it, because they didn't have an audience of email subscribers that they had any kind of control over. It was all social subscribers that they had no control over. But it's interesting with BuzzFeed, they really changed their revenue model, because as we know, advertising is not growing as it once was, even though if you look at content marketing and advertising, advertising is the sun and content marketing spending is Pluto. It's not even a planet. So we're still at a very small stage when we look at content marketing spending. But you have BuzzFeed that says, look, we can't survive on advertising. That kind of revenue is going to go away. It's very hard to predict, especially during a pandemic. So what they did was they said, okay, well, we have this Tasty brand. If you know the Tasty video series, that's done fairly well on social. They said, oh, can we? And they've created Tasty ice cream and Tasty household goods and Tasty spice kits. And about a year ago, I had the pleasure of talking with one of the marketing managers at Kohl's, and they said they couldn't even keep the Tasty household appliances on the shelves. They were going so fast. And I believe in 2019, they had $250 million in revenue just off of non-media products. The reason why I'm sharing this with you is because media companies are selling products and services. And at the same time, we have to look as brands and we have to say, look, of course, we're going to accomplish those marketing goals, but at the same time, we have an opportunity to create media lines of revenue as well. And just give you a quick example. So I'm in Cleveland, Ohio. If you're familiar with Cleveland Clinic, it's one of the top hospital networks in the world. They created a blog network called Health Essentials, which basically targets patients. And what they want to do is drive more patients to hospitals. Great, right? But they also drive multiple other lines of revenue. So they do sell advertising. They do create sponsored content for some of their partners. They syndicate their content out to different outlets. So it's Cleveland Clinic content that their other organizations are paying for and distributing. And they also create content for people like big search engines that I'm not going to say, but they create, I mean, it's amazing that they're creating content, hired for creating content. This is a hospital network, folks. Of course, they do consulting as well. And then they've got the big goal, patient volumes. But the point is you can accomplish your major marketing and PR goals and at the same time drive revenue. And this is something we're seeing over and over again. I'm just sharing one example, but it's really amazing what's happening. Now, my next book's coming out in May. It's called the second version of Content Inc. And I really expand this revenue schedule here. But I just want to give you an idea. If you look at, okay, once you build a loyal audience in the middle, you have 6 like traditionally media revenue lines. So if you look at the New York Times, Financial Times, Washington Post, they have those middle 6: advertising, conferences and events, premium content, donations, affiliate, subscription. So we've seen that. That's not a new model. And then our goals, our content marketing, PR marketing goals, we want to sell more products, sell more services, keep our customers more loyal, or create a more profitable customers in some way, better yielding or cross sales or whatever you're looking at from that goal. I believe the most innovative companies, and this is where we're headed. If you look at the Disneys of the world, the Amazons of the world, they have 7 or 8 of these. I believe that's where the most innovative companies are. I think that you have to diversify against the risk of things like a pandemic happening. And these are what smart companies are doing right now with the marketing department. The thing is you have to build a loyal audience first. That's all. We'll talk a lot about that in the rest of this call. But just to give you some thoughts about, this is what's happening right now out in the marketplace. I'm going to cover 2 more, and then Gene and I are going to get into a little Q&A. But if you have any questions, that'd be great. So here's another trend that we're seeing, and especially accelerated about what's going on in the pandemic we're in. It's this idea of doing one great thing. And if you look at any great content marketing examples or any of the greatest media companies of all time, they started on one platform. If you look at the New York Times, Financial Times, NBC, ESPN, all started on one platform. Once they built a loyal audience, then they diversified into other areas. So there you go. So if you look at from a traditional standpoint, you've got New York Times and HuffPost, you've got TED Talks, which really focused on in-person events. HuffPost was just started as one blog. New York Times is a newspaper. Red Bull Media House started with a print magazine, believe it or not, called the Red Bulletin, which they gave away at Formula One races, which now is sent to over 2 million people around the world. And Red Bull Media House is one of the leading extreme sports media companies in the world now. But they all started just doing one thing really well, which most marketers don't do well because we want to do everything all at one time. Just to give you an example, so I don't know if you're into chocolate this early in the morning. I want you to think about it this way. I don't care how much budget or resources you have. We all have a finite amount of energy and focus that we can give to a content marketing initiative. So let's say we take a candy bar, and this is all the energy you have. You're going to break it up, and then you have a choice on focus about what you're going to put those resources toward. Most companies do this. They say, oh, okay, I'm going to take a little bit, throw it to an okay blog. Maybe the podcast does pretty well. We're going to do some research. We're going to have an absolutely horrible email newsletter we send out to our customers, and we're going to be completely mediocre in social media. And I've had the extreme pleasure of working with probably half of the Fortune 100 on some of these efforts. And generally, this is what you see. It's a lot of mediocrity. It's a lot of content. There's a lot of motion going on in content creation and not a lot of change in behavior happening from our customer side. And the thing is when we do it this way, especially from the start, we're never going to reach that greatness. We're never going to reach that content tilt area where we can break through all the clutter, build an audience, and do something amazing and fantastic. So this is really hard to do, because if you're in a company right now, you're probably spread out all over the place. You're doing all kinds of things, but at some point we're going to have to make a decision to get rid of some of those things and focus on being great. So what you're seeing is saying, okay, maybe we're not going to be as active on Facebook, or maybe we're not going to do that TikTok thing we were going to do. Let's create this amazing podcast experience for this audience that we're targeting, and maybe this extremely fantastic newsletter. And we're going to be great at that for 9 to 12 months. And we're going to build an audience. And then once we build an audience, then we can go ahead and diversify. That's, I think, a winning formula, especially if you see how media companies have been started since the dawn of time. And most companies are doing just sort of a smattering of everything. So we've got to start being smarter about our strategy. And strategy is about saying no. It's about saying yes to a few things and creating some really good plans for it. It's about saying no to a lot of things. And the last thing, which has to do with what we were just talking about, is it's a real opportunity to reimagine your newsletter. I don't know. I'm sure you've been seeing it. You've seen more email newsletters pop up in the last 6 months than I think I've ever seen before. Still the best opportunity. I've been talking about this for 20 years now. And I've been saying the whole time, email newsletter, email, best channel ever. Still the best channel, because we have the most control that we can communicate directly with our audience, especially with all the privacy situation that's going on and all the data regulations. If we have that double opt-in, that first party data, so important, but we need an absolute great e-newsletter. This is something else I've been talking for a while. I want you to think about this. It's called the subscriber hierarchy. And by the way, all your fans and followers and your connections that you have on all your social media and email and print, they're all great. They're all wonderful. There's nothing wrong with getting a subscriber or a subscriber on YouTube, let's say, or a fan on Facebook. It's just not equal. So you don't have a lot of control over a fan on Facebook. That algorithm is up to Facebook. That's owned and controlled by Facebook. It's not ours. They're sort of renting that connection over to us. So what we like to do is I want you to think about, once you get those connections, moving it up the hierarchy. And at the top, it's membership site, which you need an email for, or an email newsletter. So we want to move it up to the top. So the top three, if you look at that, membership site, you have an email newsletter. Right below it is print, which I'm still a big believer in, especially today, because there's not a lot of quality print magazines being sent anymore. And as far as I can tell, the post office is still in business, still a big opportunity. And I love podcasts and using social channels, all good. It's just we don't have control over those things. And you have to remember what happened to Google Plus. You know, a lot of companies spent multiple millions of dollars on Google Plus, and what happened? They went out of business. Anybody can get MySpace at any time. So we've got to make sure that we're spending a lot of money on those areas, but we want to be careful, because we don't control those names, and it's a problem. It can be a problem. All right. So that's Gene, that's my little presentation there. And I hope we got some questions, but I'm happy to get into a little conversation this morning while everybody has their coffee, and we'll talk about some more.
Thanks, Joe, so much. So what he just did was quickly go over 4 points from his Corona Marketing and Beyond book, which we're excited to get to you after this presentation. So what I'm going to do is just start some questioning by going beyond those 4 points, because as I mentioned, I had the pleasure of already reading this. So you just talked about e-newsletters, and I found that really fascinating, and the value of e-newsletters. And as you mentioned, we all subscribe to too many perhaps. So how, as marketers, what are some of the most common mistakes we might be making as we develop those e-newsletters? What should we be avoiding?
Well, the number one thing, Gene, is the fact that on the corporate side, you just don't see the kind of consistency you see on the media side. We know a lot of email programs, and, okay, let's say it's supposed to go out every Friday morning, and sometimes it goes out at 8, and sometimes it goes out at 10, and sometimes, Bob's in charge of email and Bob's not in, and we didn't get it out, so we're going to send it out Monday. You're never going to build a quality audience unless you keep your content promise. So that's the number one thing. The second thing that we're seeing, and you've seen this in email newsletters like the New York Times Daily, the Morning Brew Daily, which is a fantastic email newsletter, is if you're going to send information to your customers, it needs to be in the email. It needs to be all in the email. It doesn't mean you can't link out to more resources, but generally, if you look at most corporate email newsletters, it's here's the link, and we'll give a little abstract on it, but you can't get really any information unless you click through, because we've always wanted people to go to our websites, right? People aren't doing that anymore, especially with mobile devices. They want to get all the content. They don't want to click through. So we have to change our programming from, we're going to do link abstract, and we actually have to give them the content in the email newsletter. So what I would recommend is get your email team together, and we have to reformulate how we're sending our email, because the same old is not going to work anymore. It's just not acceptable. You see a lot of frustration. If you've seen any of the email studies and research out there, there's a lot of frustration by consumers when they get an email and they have to click through to get more information. everybody's been Amazon to death about these great customer experiences, and we just have to be better with our email.
Terrific. So one of the things you just mentioned was to really focus on the things that you own and kill some social channels that
Yep.
maybe are mediocre. Is that a concept that's hard to convince marketers, or are they saying, thank you so much? Yes, let's focus.
Well, they're saying thank you because somebody's giving them permission to kill social channels, but they also at the same time it's so impossible to do that, because as marketers, we always think in the back of our mind that more is better. More page views is better, more subscribers is better, more. So we think that being on more social channels is better. And we all know, I mean, I was around, in marketing, content marketing, when Facebook started, when Twitter started. Now you've got TikTok and God knows what else that's out there. Immediately we're like, oh my God, we have to be on there. And that's not true anymore. You don't have to be on there. By the way, you could be on Facebook, you could be on Twitter, you could be on TikTok, and just use them as listening posts. Just use them as R&D and gathering information about your audience and customers. You don't have to go ahead and create a formal content creation and promotion process through that channel. So what we're seeing, if you look at the best content marketing platforms and their focus, the way they start is they have that one platform. Let's just call it a podcast. And then they take their social channels, which is supposed to promote that podcast that's going out. And they're generally choosing two to focus on. So if you're B2B, you might say, okay, we're going to do LinkedIn and Twitter. If you're B2C, maybe you'll do Instagram and Facebook. I don't know. But you focus on one or two social channels to really focus your attention, to create a rhythm to your content creation and promotion process. And you take the resources from those other ones and bring it back over. Gene, it's so hard to do, because people don't understand that, oh, well, why would we walk away from LinkedIn, let's say? Now, I'm not telling you to walk away from LinkedIn. What I'm telling you is, what was your goal when you started your LinkedIn account as a business, or your Facebook group account, or whatever you're doing? And are you accomplishing that goal? I mean, let's just go back and let's list all the channels that you have. And it's probably dozens and dozens to each. And you've got all kinds of different audiences. So you end up, I mean, I went and did one content audit for a company, and they had 500 different social media channels. I mean, accounts within all the, I'm like, are you kidding me? What are you doing? It's not, they're
not sleeping.
Yeah. And the problem is what happens is that only about 15 of those are used. You have all kinds of just clutter going all over the place. And then of the 15, maybe one or two are doing well. Well, why don't you just be great in the one or two and forget the rest? And that's what we're going to have to do, because you can't just lay it anymore. I mean, the days of Ping FM, I remember Ping FM when it was like, oh, let's create that social post and we'll send it out to all the social media sites at one time. Boy, that never worked, but it definitely isn't going to work anymore.
So we have a question, and it's similar to something I have a question about too, and it's about how to tell stories internally. And I love, truth be told, internal communications. You talk about how that role within an organization can be surprisingly political. So what are some ways that you've found success in communicating up the idea of limited content? How do you get buy-in for that?
Well, the first thing is you have to realize, why do we have to communicate internally about any kind of area that we're trying to build an audience? So we're talking about content marketing. If you're talking about content marketing, you're trying to build an audience of loyal subscribers to something, because we believe that when we do that, that it will make more profitable customers. They'll trust us more and they'll buy more things. And the problem is, if that's a new muscle for most organizations, Gene. We're not used to doing that. Media companies are used to doing that. We're not used to doing it. Brands, we're used to selling stuff. We have a product that we want to sell. We have the 4 Ps, and we're going to go ahead and try to promote that. So you have an organization that doesn't get it. And when somebody says, I get the question all the time, Joe, when do content marketing programs fail? Why did they get killed? you'd think they get killed for lack of results. It's not the number one reason. The number one reason is because somebody holding the purse strings inside the company doesn't understand what you're doing. That's so true. I mean, when I started in the business in 2000, I started at a traditional media company. We had a little department called custom media. That's what we did. We did newsletters and magazines for companies. And my own internal company didn't understand what we were doing. And I had to create I did a weekly inter office memorandum and sent them information about content marketing and why to do it and case studies and those types of things. A great example is Xerox. Xerox had all this different type of content for their sales team. Their sales team never used it. So the marketing team was creating all this content for the sales team. The sales team never used it. They didn't know why. They put it on the intranet. The sales team didn't know how to use it, why it was important. So they said, okay, every week we're going to send an email out to our sales team with 3 bullet points, why we created it and how they can use it. And then it changed everything. So the point is we've got to figure out who are the stakeholders and what do they need to know. So tell them why you're doing what you're doing, because they probably don't know. But if you're targeting somebody inside that you want to use your content, you have to educate them on how to do it. So I would first, I'm a big believer, I'm a big fan of the late Don Schultz, who just passed away, father of integrated marketing communications. He said, before you do any external communication, you have to get your internal communication house in order first. So figure out what you need to have happen, focus on that internal audience. And whether that's an email, whether that's a podcast series, you have to treat it just like you would an external communication initiative. Figure out what your goal is, accomplish that goal with consistent communication over time to that audience.
Before I ask a money question from a participant, Michelle, I'd love to hear from you about what you think about using podcasts as an internal communications tool.
I've never been shy about the fact that podcasts are probably my favorite thing right now, because everyone thinks that audio has been getting so congested, but it's actually not yet. There's very few verticals that are full of, there's no more content to go in there. So that's from an external standpoint. From an internal standpoint, I love it because let's say you have a sales team, and I know the sales team's probably not traveling like they used to be, but of course they're on the road, easy to just, put on some kind of audio every week at the same time. Very, it's inexpensive to send, inexpensive to create. So you can do something. And then, people love, that intimate connection of audio one-on-one. So I think that it's great as long as you go through the same process of who's the audience, what's our mission statement, what's the behavior change that we want to see with that, how are we going to deliver it, and you do it consistently over time, and you commit to that for at least 6 to 9 months so that you can see some of that, and hopefully you have some measurement in there. So you're like, okay, what do we want that internal team to do differently, and how do we measure that change?
So I've heard from you twice now. You need to commit to something for a while.
Well, it's funny. It's different because I've grown up in publishing, and when you grow up in publishing, you get 3 years. So if you create a new publishing brand, and it's changed a little bit because everybody wants, profit so fast these days. But if you say, I'm going to create a new media brand, you generally know that it takes 3 years to get to profitability. So we had, first 9 to 12 months, 15 months, you're all about finding your content tilt, your differentiation area, and building audience. That's what you're doing. And we think as marketers and PR pros that we can create something and in 3 to 6 months see some kind of a change. So I've always said, when somebody says, Joe, I really want to do this content marketing thing, I've got 6 months, what should I expect? I always say nothing. Don't expect anything in 6 months. If you only have 6 months, go buy advertising, go interrupt people. It's fine. I'm not against advertising, but content marketing is a true commitment. And when we I just looked at about 100 different case studies. It generally takes about 12 to 15 months to get to, your ROI, to get to revenue measurement. And there's a lot of companies out there that aren't patient enough to do that. And that's why if you are patient, and you can build in that internal communication flexibility so people give you a long leash to make this happen, then you can really make some change happen. And if we've seen all the great content marketing examples, it generally, you got to get to 12 months. It's just building a loyal audience takes time. It does. And as an audience person, you should know that it takes time for you to build something up, because if you even look at how long, I mean, at Content Marketing Institute, when we look at our best customers have been, subscribed to our magazine or newsletter for at least 12 months. Those are the ones that spend the most money. That's what we know. And that's just, it's not new news, but sometimes we forget about it.
So you mentioned that patience is a virtue. How do you convince the decision makers within an organization to be patient? How do you convince them that content is worth the money? Do you have to tie it back to attrition models? Are there some metrics that are more meaningful than others?
Yeah.
How do we convince?
Yeah, I mean, the first thing is that what are you trying to do, right? I mean, we're not just creating content for content's sake here. What's the goal? Are we launching a new brand? Are we worried about we're losing customers, so we have to focus on a loyalty program? So what is the overall goal that we're trying to conquer with our content creation efforts? And then when you go through that, you have to build out the entire plan and get those case studies, because the great thing is when we started Content Marketing Institute in 2010, didn't have a lot of great case studies, didn't have a lot of great enterprise case studies. Now you have so many. Like, for example, in Corona Marketing, I talk about the opportunity to actually buy a media brand, buy somebody else's brand, buy an influencer's brand, so that you don't have to start from scratch. Well, when I first started talking about this 10 years, Gene, it didn't exist. Like, nobody really did that outside of L'Oreal buying makeup.com. Well, now every month you see a brand buying something, where HubSpot goes out and buys a media blog, or Aero Electronics, who's the large Fortune 119 company. They bought 51 different media brands out there. Now they're the largest media company in the electronics engineering industry. So those are the types of things we have. So once you figure out what that goal is, go out and find the case studies. They're there in every industry. They're pretty easily found, and make sure that if you do that with the case studies, then you have to communicate internally and say, look, if we're going to do this, this takes time. If you see by XYZ case study, it took them 19 months, 27 months, whatever, of consistent communication, whatever, to build that audience. Let them know on hand, because you have to set it up. Because if they expect true results off of this in 6 to 9 months, you have to tell them right away that you're not going to do that. And that's the tough part about it, because everybody wants instantaneous. Oh yeah, I want to see quantitative measurement results right now. Well, you're not going to get that in 6 to 9 months. I'm sorry. Maybe you'll get lucky, but you just don't see it very often. So you've got the case studies out there. Communicate those to your internal stakeholders now, so that they'll give you the leeway, so that when you can get that, reach that goal in 12 to 18 months.
Terrific. Attendee Lori would like to know that, drill down a little deeper. You mentioned that you're a big fan of print. Are you referencing paid or earned opportunities, or both?
Well, I have no issue with print advertising, especially today, where there's a lot of media companies giving heavy, significant discounts on it. So, I mean, if you are going to do that from a paid print advertising standpoint, I would just commit to it. I mean, you can see all the results. You got to do at least 7 months in a row to I think see any kind of results from that standpoint. Just consistency and everything. But what I'm talking about is, do you want to create a proprietary print newsletter or magazine? That's where I really think the opportunity is at. So what are you seeing? I'll give you a good example of print making a comeback. I don't know if anybody's getting their holiday catalogs. I got a Walmart catalog. I got an Amazon catalog. I just got a Target big old catalog. I mean, it's pretty amazing that we're seeing this movement back to, in this case, direct mail. Mm-hmm. But I think that we can take that direct mail experience and not just sell the products and services. So if you look at Amazon's catalog, it's interesting because they do a lot of fun things. They've got some games in there. They've got some content in there. That's where I think the opportunity is at. So if you're going to create something in print, whether it's purchasing a magazine that a media company can't do anymore, that's targeting your audience, I think you're going to see a comeback. And I'm not saying comeback in print. Print's never going to be the way it was before. But the reason why it's such a big opportunity is nobody's doing it. Even the major media companies, they're all leaving print. Wall Street Journal just said they're going to send out less print circulation. At some point, all these media companies are not going to be able to afford in print anymore. But we have a marketing budget. We don't need to make money directly off the magazine. What we need to do is show that behavior is changing. If we can do that, I think there's an opportunity in print.
Terrific. Attendee Karen wants to drill down just a bit deeper about e-newsletters.
Sure.
And especially in the B2B space, you might have a topic that takes some time to get to the core of the mission of the story. How do you provide that all within your e-newsletter? Or do you do a synopsis and drive them to other owned properties, like say a website?
You can do it. Let's say that you have, I mean, here's the B2B email newsletter marketing model. It's like, oh, okay, we did 3 blog posts last week. Here's our email with all 3 of them, and title, abstract, title, abstract, title, abstract, click to our website, which is fine, but you're going to see less and less open rates. I'm sure you're looking at the open rates right now and you're not happy with it. So what can we do better? If you're not giving a differentiated content experience in your email newsletter, you've got a problem. So what I would recommend is print out your last couple, get your team together and review them. What I found out when we do a content audit over email, most of the marketing team they don't read the email newsletters. The CEO definitely doesn't read the email newsletters. And we just became happy at some point with a 4 or 5% open rate, which is terrible. Like, we really should focus on 15, 20% open rate. And we've got to make sure that, and hopefully better than that. So I would just look at reimagining. If it's working, it's great. But I'm under the assumption that, if you have some meaty content, give a really healthy synopsis so they don't have to necessarily click through. Or what I would say is, Content Marketing Institute in our email newsletter, this is 5 years ago. We weren't happy with the open rate. It dipped to about 12%. We said there's a problem. So what we said is we have to create an experience in email that they can't get anywhere else. So I started to write a weekly note. And that note was original. It was just to those email subscribers. It wasn't available anywhere else. And our open rate went from 12 to 18% in like 3 months, which is a big deal. And that was the only change that we made. So I would look and just ask yourself, do you have a differentiated content experience in your email newsletter? And if you don't, and you're just repurposing, it might not be of value. Not that curation can be great, but that curation experience has to be a unique content experience, or why are they going to open the email newsletter in the first place?
Terrific. I'm going to ask one final question. I'm going to ask you to make a prediction.
Oh, geez. All right.
You start out Corona marketing by saying, in 2001-03 timeframe, we started blogging, and then the Great Recession happened in 2010, and we went to multiple channels: social media, video marketing, podcasting, etc. Now we really content marketing. Let's do this thing. What's your prediction for the 4th stage, and when, perhaps?
Well, I think we're already seeing the starts of it. And as I mentioned before, you've got companies like Amazon and Google and Disney that are their marketing centers of excellence, let's say, are driving 6, 7, 8 different forms of revenue. And what you realize, and then of course, look at the BuzzFeeds and the New York Times of the world, the media companies, where they're starting to sell products and services. So what you're really starting to see is when it comes to content creation, the media model and then the brand model is basically the same. If I look at a Wall Street Journal and then I look at a Target, let's say, and I really look at the content creation programs, if I can take what they sell out of it for 1 second, what they're doing is almost the same type of stuff. We're not quite there. We're not quite there on the brand side yet, and media companies aren't quite there on the product side yet. But that's that fourth stage, and that's what we're going to see, Gene, where you'll only perceive the difference from a media company and a product and service company from that, whatever that brand means to you, whatever that relationship is. But from a content creation, promotion, distribution, audience building, subscriber standpoint, they are going to be identical. And I think that happens probably over the next 5 years, especially with how fast technology is moving. So the most innovative companies, either on the media side or on the product and service side, that's where they're going. They're driving 8, 9, 10 different forms of revenue directly out of marketing. They're all selling products. They're all selling media. You can't tell the difference.
Terrific. We can't thank you enough for all your time and talent today, and discussing content marketing with us so in-depthly. One thing I want to let our attendees know, that I think I heard this, that you're encouraging that we eat more chocolate, and that anytime we do, we should think about content energy.
That's exactly right. So the more chocolate that you eat, the more that you'll think about content creation the right way. Absolutely.
Great.
And who doesn't want more chocolate? Everybody does.
Absolutely. So thank you so very, very much. And as I mentioned, we will send the link to Joe's content marketing book. And then also we'll provide more information for our next Sharper Angle series. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great day, everyone.